We have been working with almost for a year and 3 months now. So where we've been part of this, blessed to be a part of the journey that Chargebee has taken with respect to their implementation of adaptive work model, and we've got frankly we've got the hot seat to visualize, to see all of this happening in front of us, and it also is a proud moment that we were a part of it some way or the other. But today we're going to be picking Supriya's thoughts and what she's seen over the last year and a half. By the way, congratulations, Supriya, on the 1 year completion of AWM
Thank
recently concluded. So that's again a huge milestone, because to pull off something that you've done is like in itself a big deal. But then pulling it off and doing it at style for a year is something awesome. So congrats on that to you and your team. So today we're going to understand what has made Chargebee's adaptive work model successful. And in my knowledge, this is probably one of the biggest distributed hybrid remote implementations that I've seen in any startup, right? Any company, and leave alone a unicorn that Chargebee is, right? So it's for me, I think this is probably the best case study that India can put forward towards giving a voice to the flexibility of workplace. So Supriya, so I think I'm going to start off this entire conversation with a very hot topic that's there going on now, the zeitgeist, which is about, you'd have seen the news that there's been a mass resignation at TCS. Again, the name is already out, so it's not like I'm leaking the name out. But there's been, because women are protesting silently in many companies and more vociferously in many other companies by saying that return to office to pre-COVID levels is actually detrimental to them contributing to the company, for them to have the flexibility that they need the most, right? So that's what's happening. And farmers insurance, there's a threat that an employee union has been formed, that they're saying that they'll resign if farmers calls everybody back to office. So what's your take on it, personal take on it, being a woman leader in the organization? And number two, how has AWM, or distributed hybrid remote for everybody else, I mean, generalizing the terminology, how has that been to women workforce in Chargebee? If you could just spill some things on that.
Sure, sure. First of all, I would like to extend congratulations to the entire GoFloaters team as well, because when Chargebee thought of this model, without the execution partnership that we had with GoFloaters, this wouldn't have been a smooth journey as much as it has been. And of course, there were challenges, and we teamed up together to navigate those. So congratulations to GoFloaters team on that as well.
Thank you.
And to talk about your first question, as to what has the hybrid impact been on women workforce, and me personally being one of those folks, what I can say is, and this has come from multiple women employees in Chargebee as well, is that there's a lot of opportunity for growth at a personal level in the hybrid work mode, because it's not just you being able to dedicate more time to your family. It's also your personal growth, personal interest, mental well-being, emotional well-being that has been that has been an opportunity to polish that, to sustain that. With hybrid, see what makes sense, because there's this element of protest, right? What makes a person feel agitated or a little frustrated about a very strong stance, is that when I'm doing my best, when I do not have a reason, when the company doesn't have a reason to question my productivity or efficiency, and then a hard stance is taken, then naturally, without with regards to all gender, any person would feel that, hey, what is the justification for this?
Right, right.
And that's where I personally believe the frustration is coming from, where employees would take a drastic step such as resignation, and now this is happening at mass level. So it's a very collective sentiment, and it comes from the fact that people have transitioned to a certain work mode when they weren't ready for it. So it was more effort that they had to put in. So
Right.
along with that more effort, and one thing that in terms of work life balance that happened during this transition was people were overworking, because they couldn't have like a visual differentiation or a physical boundary at that time to understand where their work day was ending.
Hmm.
So in that way, if you see the companies that tested or asked their employees if they were productive or they measured it themselves, they saw productivity boom when companies switched to remote mode or hybrid mode. So
Right.
now the question is that when I am getting an opportunity to contribute as much as I could to the company when we were in a traditional office setup, plus given some more, and then also being able to take care of myself, my family, my other interests and hobbies and growth, why am I not being heard? So I think with an empathetic stance, if people feel heard, if you try and actually solve the real problems that they have, because this is an assumed problem that hey, you're not productive, but then
Right.
the employee would say, can you tell me where I'm not, fulfilling your expectations? So that conversation is missing, where I think the frustration is stemming from.
Absolutely, I think it's a very valid point, right? So there's no, I mean, you are giving your best, and then when somebody's, I mean, not giving a reason or justification to that, says that hey, this is not working.
Yeah.
That's this,
Yeah.
and they're taking a U-turn on that, and certainly feels hard on you.
Yeah.
And anecdotally also, it's like for example, when we looked at the data, we were seeing that 23% of users on GoFloaters who are using co-working spaces, right, were women. 23%, right?
Right.
When the industry average of women in workforce in an IT technology setup is just 21% across India, 23% of users were women, which means that women were more akin to come to an office to collaborate and work whenever it made sense, right? Whenever
Right.
I want the flexibility to be at home and I want to deliver other things apart from like personal aspirations and work-life balance and other responsibilities, I have to do that. But I am willing to come collaborate and work together and meet the business goals and meet my personal goals at the same time. And yeah, so I think the data is there to prove that productive. I mean, women are I mean willing to. They're not willing to completely trade off the flexibility. They want the flexibility at the same time be at their best to contribute to the business goals of the company that they're part
Definitely.
of. So now coming. So that's one hot topic out of the plate of discussions. But then now let's go back in 2022 when this AWM was on paper, right? It was all thought through really well. It was on paper. Right? I think you had a couple of ways. You were identifying a couple of ways in which you can pilot this out and all that. So in 2022, when all of this, the implementation of it began, right? What were the set of challenges that Chargebee as an organization? Because by I think roughly around that time, every company, every employer almost spent 18 months working from home or remotely,
Right.
right? So what are the kind of challenges when AWM began, right? When the
Hmm.
implementation rollout began,
Mhm.
what were your top 3 or 4 challenges that you want to solve in your design of AWM for your company, right? So and how did you go about solving it?
Right. I'll do a little bit of a rewind to give some context. So 13th March 2020 was the day when Chargebee transitioned into work from home mode, and it was an overnight transition. Nobody was prepared for it. There weren't systems or processes, and everybody, including the teams and individuals, and then people going back to their homes and just absorbing the whole scenario that came with the COVID struggle. Amidst that is when the transition to work from home happened. And then people slowly took their time. The company was empathetic enough to understand that this transition is going to be a little slow. And then it was a very balanced approach by both the sides, where people then slowly adopted to the work from home mode. Going forward, if we take a look at 21, after a year of work from home, what we did was we ran an org-wide pulse survey to hear straight from the employees as to how they had adopted, what were their challenges, what was working well for them in this mode, and how did they feel about continuing this forward. And so there were some positive aspects that came up, such as there were about 74% people who straight away said that they liked working remotely.
Hmm.
There were 87% people that said that they were equally or more productive in this new setup. So we had data points to establish certain facts, but also there were prominent challenges. Now these challenges were mostly towards aspects such as social connect. So to give you some numbers, 71% of the people felt that they weren't able to connect personally. People thought that networking across different functions, not just within their team, but across different functions, was getting a little challenging. Um, there was also some resistance in terms of having informal chat, because you wouldn't naturally go and set up an informal conversation with somebody. But
Right.
if you were in an office space, you would have that water cooler chat, and there would be, some brainstorming, some bonding, peer learning that would happen. So those were the
Right.
kind of challenges that surfaced at that point. So initially, our goal was to solve for work from home mode alone. At that time, AWM did not exist,
Okay.
and when these challenges surfaced is when we realized that we needed a structured work model that could solve for challenges that came from work from home mode. And our insight was that work from home mode could be just one work mode, but there would have to be plugins to make it successful. It can't operate entirely on its own.
Right.
And before, when we were operating at in an office space, um, there was like a know-how of how other teams were operating, of what decisions were being made. You had a leeway to share your opinions, because the leaders were right in front of you or around you throughout the day.
Right.
So
Right.
these sort of collaboration challenges is what we was trying to focus on, and that's when in-person meetings was another mode that came up, where we wanted teams to travel to a common place, common location, and then spend some time together, a few days working on some priority projects, planning for the next quarter, or just bonding. So we also made sure that there were social activities involved when they came in together.
Hmm.
So that happened to be our second work mode. So work from home and in-person meetings were our two initial work modes. The third work mode that we came up with was the co-working mode, and that's when, of course, GoFloaters came into picture for Chargebee. So our initial idea was, when COVID wave started to simmer down, our natural instinct was also that maybe it's time to go back to a traditional setup again.
Right. Right.
But we wanted to make sure that we were hearing our employees, taking a decision based on what they were telling us, what the business was telling us. So at the core of AWM, we had three things in mind, which was, what are the business interests, and how do we safeguard that? What are our employee requests? What is going to really help them do their best work? And the third is being able to adapt to external situations. So be it COVID, market conditions, any external situation. So we wanted a work model that could adopt to all of these situations simultaneously, and that's how we plugged in systems thinking when we approached this project.
Right.
And so, and the third work mode was actually when we were trying to look for a small dedicated space in a couple of cities with critical mass. So our idea was that we'll take a small space and see how willingly people would want to come to an office,
Right.
and then make a decision on moving to a larger space or asking people to relocate, and all of those aspects. But while we were doing that, we ourselves were able to identify some challenges. To name a couple, first was people were still apprehensive about COVID. Not everyone was, because the COVID wave was going up and down, and there were lockdowns in
Right.
some places, entirely restricted areas in some locations. So we sense that there is going to be apprehension if we were to call people back. So let's make them feel comfortable, let's hear them. If they want to really come, they would come, but how do we make it easy for them? That's when location access became a very prominent factor. For example, Bangalore, which deals with massive traffic every single day, you would hear somebody complain about commute. So in that situation, what would make office experience easy for somebody is giving them access to the nearest office environment.
Right.
And that's when we started looking at co-working spaces. And then we spoke to individual co-working facilities, and then all of those access challenges. And while trying to navigate that is when we came to GoFloaters. And what made sense to us is that we could provide office environment to people across multiple cities. Now we didn't have to limit ourselves to only critical mass cities, like
Correct.
say top one, top two. Now we had options to go to other cities as well. So we could also try tier two cities. So our approach was that we'll pick three tier two cities, three tier one cities, and get a sense of both the
Right.
population. And that's how we ran a 3-month co-working pilot, which we ran in 6 cities. And our initial target was to cater to about 550 people. and we were expecting 170 or so bookings in the first month, which happened to be 500 plus. And then in months 2 and 3 we saw a 64% raise, and we just knew that okay, something is hitting right here. So we are not forcing people to come to office. We are not forcing a certain environment, or
Right.
taking away flexibility, but also making sure that they have the right environment in case they need to be in a office
Right.
situation. So
So one point, Supriya, that I want to highlight to everybody who's listening in, right? So a lot of companies say they are hybrid, but then it's a prescribed form of hybrid, right? So they say Monday, Tuesday, or so 3 days a week, 2 days a
right.
week. So in your case, what was overwhelming, I mean, joyous moment for us, I mean, collectively as a team is like
Yeah.
there was no prescription there, right? It's just like, hey, if you want to do this, this is there, right? It's up to you to come. I mean, you're not going to be penalized because you don't come. Neither are you going to be rewarded if you come, right? It's just, it's your option, right? If you think for you as an individual, it makes sense for you to come to a co-working space and work, or it makes sense for you to have a in-person meeting and do it, you do it. We just enable that, right? And and it broke a lot of myths at the time that people don't want to come, they don't want to break the work from home thing, and
Mm.
everybody wanted to hug their pillows and cushions and right sofa sets and just stay there planted like a permanent fixture at their home, right? But that it broke all those myths there, and overwhelming response in those first 3 months, I would say, right?
Right. Right.
And coming back to your challenges, Supriya, sorry if I cut you short. Maybe I will, I'll let you continue and close that, because I want to kind of pick up on the challenges that you talked about, intra team, the water cooler. How is that kind of curious to know after you enabled it? How is that? How is those challenges being addressed? And what is your teams? What are your teams feeling about it?
Right. So to answer your first question, right? When Chargebee is recognized and has been operating as a globally distributed company, so even if we were to prescribe that, hey, Chennai folks or Bangalore folks come in on Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, and then other cities can come, we are still going to need a system that allows people to collaborate virtually. We are still going to have to be able to cater to global collaboration, which
Right,
is not going to be dependent or couldn't be entirely solved by prescribing an in-person or physical interaction.
right,
So our approach is that regardless of how much in-person interaction you're able to enable, we have to focus simultaneously on some virtual processes and systems, be it adoption of async practices, um, or having the right tools for everybody to collaborate across time zones, or documentation formats. So these simple things would also have to plug in to actually make the entire work model successful. And so prescription, we were also learning from how other companies were approaching it, right?
right, right,
And when we saw that some companies had called people back to a particular location, and then the other part of the same pool resisted in coming back. So now what happens is, say I have moved to Bombay because my company is called us back, but my colleague from the same team has refused to come. So now I go to the office to only again virtually collaborate with that person. So how effective is that? Because then
right.
you're burdening yourself with infrastructure costs. Your employees are not entirely happy. The ones who are willing to relocate aren't exactly getting the efficiency or productivity. So
And they
how?
probably some the ones who are relocating also kind of feel that they've been, they've been duped into it, right? I mean,
Right.
when it's not, you're not able to implement it across organizations. Why me? Why alone me?
Right.
Yeah,
Right. So that sentiment is also something that we were sensing from what other companies were trying at that point. And so when we say flexibility, we wanted to be truly able
yeah,
to live that and offer that. So
right,
that's how we decided that prescription is probably not the right way, at least for our context. Of course, it would have made sense for a lot of other companies, and we're mindful of that. But that's how we approach the prescription and not non-prescriptive format.
non-prescriptive format. Yeah,
Um, with regards to social connect and how co-working and in-person meetings has helped, certainly I think the only way to have collaboration truly be successful was to enable some form of physical in-person interaction. And so in-person meetings are something that we are constantly working on. Even now we're trying to streamline the process, trying to see what cadence makes sense. Again, should we be prescriptive there? Should we say
right.
that, hey, meet twice every year, or 5 times every year? Or maybe whenever they need to meet is when they get a choice to meet, and we plan the process and all the resources accordingly. So that's something we are trying to solve for. But every time that people have had a chance to easily access a meeting room at a co-working space, be it for in-person meeting or just to catch up with local folks, it has
Right.
developed a sense of belonging. It has increased opportunities for peer learning, because one of the initiatives we've recently started, as you know, is co-working day, right?
Yeah.
So that's mostly to get people from the same city come to a co-working space, and we don't compel them to come. We just say that, hey, we are going to request you to experience what it's like to work with your colleagues, because we've been remote for so long. So we want to also give you this opportunity to connect socially. And so
Right.
people from different teams come together, and now this person would know a problem that some other team is facing that they wouldn't have otherwise known. So that context exchange is something that is enriching for people, at an individual level, at a team level. And in-person meetings definitely are more intentional, where you come with your team and functions, and then what it really helps with is quicker decision making, which is something that folks say that when you're in distributed you can't have quicker decision. But I think
Right.
if your plugins are streamlined properly, and they're designed mindfully, collaboration, innovation are some factors that can be addressed. And of course, this is an ongoing process.
Correct.
Even in terms of, you mentioned about culture, right? Culture again is a work in progress that we'll have to continuously keep on evolving, because there's going to be new generations coming in, new lifestyle expectations that they're going to have. So we can't stick to just one answer that fits everything, and we have to continuously evolve the work model as well. So that's how our approach has been, and our response mostly from folks has been great. The general expectation is just more opportunities for social connect, but otherwise we've not heard that productivity at a personal level, when we've done our outreach within the company, has been impacted, in a negative way. So
Right.
that's
Right. Right. So I think you touched upon some of the tools or weapons that naysayers of flexible working use, right? So uh, uh, flexible work companies or distributed remote companies cannot be innovative, right?
yeah.
Innovation takes a back seat, right? Or they say culture erodes, right? I mean, culture. I mean, you can't like people have to be. I mean, locked in the same room to actually live and breathe the culture of a company, right? So what do you have to say, right? I mean, and your team, culture and system design team. I mean, culture is first name and system design is the
Yeah.
second name of your team. So culture, I'm very sure would have been top of your mind while designing AWM, right? I mean, you didn't. I mean, you were already a large company by the time you switched to this, right? It's not like you. I mean, you were born remote, right? You
Yeah.
you you were physically there, and you had to switch like everybody in the planet had to do, and then you have adopted, right? So how is like I mean, and again, being a SaaS product company in a very competitive landscape and a global product firm that you are, with such a diverse set of people from different walks of life. So how are you able to keep the culture intact, and what specific measures is your team doing to
Right.
keep that culture of innovating and continuous innovation, continuous delivery of releases of products? How are you doing? What are your special? Uh, did you have to do anything special when you switched to AWM? And if so, what were they?
Right. So, like I said, culture, because it's an ever evolving thing. One of the aspects that we were focusing on, and we're still working on all of these things, but uh, one opportunity that co working mode, for example, gave was to be able to invite new hires to an office environment. And although it's not a dedicated office space, just having an interaction in person with, say, be it your manager or be it people from other functions. So now when a new hire comes in, he or she is going to a co-working space, and they see the office environment. They also meet their colleagues, they have discussions, context exchange, and all of that. With that, they also understand the tone of how generally the company folks operate. So that's again a transition of values, right? Apart from that, we have been mindful of conducting trainings, especially at manager levels. There are cultural trainings, how to conduct meetings effectively, how to have effective feedback loops with their teams and all of that. Then of course the diversity, inclusivity is one aspect that we've always been, not just now after the transition, but Chargebee in general has been very mindful of spreading awareness about it within the organization. So there are trainings that we do in terms of effectiveness and productivity to maintain that. Like I said, async has been something that we are focusing quite aggressively on right now. And for social connect, like I mentioned, there are co-working days that we are planning. We want to make sure that there's enough opportunity for people to connect in person, also virtually. So
Right.
initially what we had done was, at team level, there would be virtual lunches, or they would watch a movie, or take a virtual travel experience. So those kind of virtual connect activities were also a part of AWM. One other aspect during hiring is the culture fit round. So before even a person enters the company, we want to ensure that there is alignment on how they see Chargebee and how Chargebee would expect them to operate. So culture fit round is one intentional activity to ensure that while being distributed and diverse, we are also sticking to the values with which the organization wants to operate and scale.
Right.
The other part is rewards and recognition aspect, where the values that our organization believes in are practiced on a day-to-day operational scale, right? So if somebody's been very proactive, so one of our values is bias for action. So there's a culture of appreciating, acknowledging those efforts in a public forum, where we can drive inspiration and motivation from each other.
Mhm.
So that is sort of something that drives our culture and values in our day-to-day working. So those are some of our
Right.
efforts.
Right. And such a large organization that you are, right? So I mean, you've touched upon what the people on the ground kind of the benefits and flexibilities. So how have your BU heads or business heads, and I mean, have embraced this, right? Are they feeling that? I mean, in general, right? So are they feeling that they are able to deliver on their results? Their teams are geared up to deliver on the results, and they feel that this is a model that they can scale, because I'm sure, like, within the company, you would have had people like exchanging notes saying, hey, this may be working, this may not be working, and all that. So I mean, 1 year into AWM,
Mhm.
what are your BU heads talking about, or what do they have to say about AWM?
Right. I think Chargebee in terms of leadership has been very fortunate, because we've always luckily had leaders who are very empathetic about how the employees are feeling, and that sentiment has been a driving factor for their decisions also. So they're open to experimentation, right? You mentioned about how some of the companies went ahead with a decision to be flexible and then took it back. You never know, we might as well do it, not do it, but it would come from the fact that how are the teams operating, how is an individual feeling. So
Right.
they have in connect with their teams individually as well, trying to understand what is working well, and what our focus, or with leadership also, what their focus is on. Hey, we'll solve for what is not working well. What is already working well, we don't want to disrupt that if it's not required. So that openness to experimentation is what has benefited Chargebee to actually be able to sustain the work model for so long. Even going forward, and the interactions when somebody says that this might not be working, the leaders are also willing to look at what aspect of this particular work mode is not working.
Right.
How can they at their individual level, or leadership level, collaborating across the leadership level, what could they solve for here? So that's been a general approach, and of course there have been inputs wherein we feel that certain functions might work better if they are collaborating more often in person. And so, like I said, the work model is going to continuously evolve, and if that needs to be the case for a certain function, if the team members, leaders, if the business output also demands for a more closer collaboration in person, then we'll also solve for that.
Right.
So which is why what we do is have a continuous feedback loop in place. We keep talking to people across the org, across different levels and regions also, so that we are aware of where we need to tweak and how we need to tweak the work mode, and leaders are also in alignment, and they're open to listening to how employees are feeling, and sort of aligning their approach and our team's approach accordingly. So that's how this
I
happens.
think one, as an observer, I would like to add that one very strong reason why you've been able to sustain this is like, leaders are not, I mean, they're walking the talk, right? Every time they're walking the talk. So they are, I mean, it's not just the flexibility to work from home and work from office is not just for everybody else, right? So leaders are coming there, they're showing that this is how they believe this can happen, right? And then see them walking the talk, and being there, open to listen to feedback, right? Available for the team to come and talk to them, right? So they're not like sitting in one cubicle in a closed room and then never come out of step out of it, right? So they are sitting in a co-working bay and sitting and working, and they're open for feedback. I think that's one of the critical reasons why I think, I mean, it's no longer, no longer them versus us, right? We're
Correct.
all doing this together, right?
Yes.
I think that's a great way to lead by example, in my opinion, right? So
Correct.
now, just kind of as we round, I mean, coming to the towards the end of the time here, Supriya. So, from if you have to sum up your year and a half of year and 2 months of running AWM, implementing it and seeing this in action
Yeah.
on the ground, right? If you had to pick a few learnings that you want to pass on to other companies, because I see a lot of companies. I mean, I'm not saying that anybody has a success formula, right? I mean, we can't prescribe a success formula for I mean, hybrid work or distributed work, and every company has to figure their own formula. Unfortunately, you can't ask ChatGPT for an answer, and
Yeah.
but you can't implement it, right? It's not doesn't work that way, right?
Yeah.
Unfortunately, right? But what if you had to summarize this entire learning and say, hey, these are the things that I've learned as person part of the implementation team of this? What would you want to share it with the rest of the companies that are also trying to dabble with different forms of hybrid work?
Right. I think one of the most important factor for this would be just being very open to change. I think for even as an individual, we have a tendency to default back to what has always been the case.
Right,
So just breaking that barrier first mentally is something that will help us be more experimental. I think within the last couple of years, since remote work has taken over globally, we've seen that it has been an effective work mode, or hybrid has been an effective work mode. That's also why a lot of companies that had switched back to being a traditional company have now again decided to become a hybrid, or a remote workforce. So I think learnings would come and go as things evolve. Like I mentioned earlier, with different generations coming in, because 2 or 3 or 5 years down the line, who are going to be your largest employee base? What is that generation? What are their lifestyle expectations? What does work-life balance mean to them? What does productivity mean to them? Is
right,
it how many hours you're putting in, or how effectively you're coming up with outcome, or how innovative is your idea? So those kind of factors, if we are able to keep in, I think it'll just be able, like, very easy for people to accept that, hey, the way we work has now changed, and it will continue to change. And as a company that would want to scale and grow, and be global, we'd have to adopt to different cultures and regions and expectations. And unless we're experimental about how we're approaching it, we won't get the answers. So
right,
that's my biggest learning, because even when we were figuring out AWM, there were a lot of failures and successes, and we kept picking the right things, sometimes the wrong things, but then also trying and tweaking it again. And it's also, I think, upon the employees to be able to let the company experiment a little, because not everyone would have the right answer.
right.
Right. So it's a two-way street, and I think um, the best thing to do is to listen to what your folks are saying. When they feel heard and seen is when your work model and your outputs are actually going to be effective. So that's my major learning from EWM journey.
Awesome. I think, I think I'll add one bit to it. What you probably did not vocalize that much is that the experimentation has been very fast as well, right? When employees feel that they're heard, and then
Hmm.
an action is taken on it, and they see that it's happening in the next 1 week.
Yes.
they're more willing to come back to give feedback the next time, right? A lot of companies, they collect, do surveys, and keep the data, but
Yeah.
nobody knows what's happening to that, right? No, I mean, what are you action taking on it, and that kind of demotivates you to even share the next survey in a very, I mean, and respond to the next survey with your thoughts there, right? And the last question, Supriya, you brought it up multiple times in the call, and I have to ask this question, right? So a lot of companies were cat on the wall for quite some time. Hey, traditional versus hybrid. A lot of companies like went all the way to rebrand themselves as a hybrid work company, right? And then they have now flipped over completely, right? They've changed colors. Have to use a more, I mean, idiom there. So, what in Chargebee is keeping your resolve? Again, I'm not saying that this will be true for the next 1 year, right? But for the next quarter, next half a year or so, your resolve is on getting AWM correct and constantly getting it correct. It's not like you've gotten it right, you keep doing that. What, how do you see this? Like, I mean, if I had to ask you, do you see AWM as a competitive advantage to Chargebee, right? In terms of business, in terms of talent pool, in terms of whatever aspects, business aspects, and how do you think that this is actually positioning Chargebee for the next level or scale of growth, right? I mean, what's making the resolve so strong with the leadership, with the next in line, and at the grassroots level?
Right. Right. So one of the things is, like I've said multiple times, it's an evolving thing. A work model, culture, all of these are very variable set of elements for a organization, and the same is true for us. So tomorrow, if we have to change our work modes to fit in what is best for the employees and business outcomes, we are open to do that. So when we say be experimental, we'd also be willing to experiment going back to certain things also. So I understand where companies have transitioned back to certain work modes, but for now what is keeping our resolve is that we hear from employees as to what is working well from them for them, right? And what is not working well for them becomes our priority. So we're able to switch within those priorities. Now if productivity is not so much of an issue in this work mode and social connect is, then the AWM work mode that addresses, or that could potentially a newer work mode could address that issue, is what our priority is going to be. So
Right,
we are in the mindset of solving for what needs attention. And in long term, I think because if we are able to solve for social connect along with efficiency, um, this is here to stay. This work mode is here to stay because our advantage at this point is that we have access to talent and the best of the talent across the globe. And what better competitive advantage than that, right? When you have the best folks in the industry with amazing skill sets, it's not just the person performing their own role, but also the people associated with them, they're going to improve and do better. So
right,
in that way, business outcome is also very very positive. The second aspect is with the kind of market conditions we have, or pandemic introduced us to a whole new uncertainty, right? In those equations, um, the reason we call this an adaptive workplace model is because we are ready to adapt to external situations as well, while we are taking care of employee experience and business outcomes. So because we have given ourselves also that flexibility to mold into external situations and do what is right, we feel like we can afford to continue experimenting, continue being in this work mode, because right now we are able to offer work from home, which gives you complete flexibility. But then you also have the option to go leverage an office environment, meet your colleagues from your team, from other teams. With in-person meetings, you have an opportunity to bond within your function also. Then we're doing co-working days. So we are placing, it's like bringing the Lego blocks together and building as we go.
right.
So because our leadership and employees across have been supportive of giving us that leverage to experiment a little, I think that's what keeps our resolve and motivation to continue and be a company that's open and flexible in its true
Right.
sense.
No, absolutely. I think see the paradox that I want to kind of summarize whatever you said with, right. The companies that say that you cannot be innovative if you're not in the office, right. you're fundamentally, you've not been innovative to adapt yourself to the new situation. As a company, you've not, if you think that going back to what worked before is the best way to do it, where is that innovation in your workplace model in the first place, right? So
Right.
it's kind of an oxymoron, right? You say
Yeah.
innovation is not, but you're not innovating yourself as a leader.
Right.
So
Right.
then, what expectation do you have on your teams? Anyway, I think brilliantly summed up, right? And like I said, I think what clearly comes across, like, are two very strong things, right? Be open to experiment, listen, constantly keep listening, right? And constant third is like keep tweaking the model, like work on problems, right? I mean, build on your strengths and work on the problems that are, because what I've seen, again, as an observer from the entire hybrid, is like initially it was a personal productivity, personal
Mhm.
employee engagement, then team collaboration, now intra-team collaboration culture, right? So the problems keep changing, right? With time
Right.
they keep changing, right? So you can't have one solution that works every time. So you need to keep kind of constantly tweaking. And I see that with able minds at work at Chargebee, like you've been able to tweak the model and never assumed that we've reached a milestone, right? We've reached somewhere, right? It's always a moving target, right? And you are kind of innovating within the company to serve your workforce really well. So I think thanks for sharing all these tidbits of information, and it kind of was great to relive some of those historical moments that you talked about, and also understand what really is playing in the heads of, I mean, your team, and the leadership at Chargebee, and how this is working, right? I'm very hopeful that a lot of other companies probably are much earlier in the stage of embracing this or getting into this, may will find this very useful to kind of understand what could be their priorities and their approach, and more so the mindset with which they had to approach building an innovative distributed workforce for themselves. Uh, Thank you, Supriya. Thanks, pleasure talking to you as always, and thanks for spilling the beans on how it's working, and opening up the doors to the insights and inner workings of how you are operating this. Uh,
Thank you so much, Sham. It's been another great session with GoFloaters, and looking forward to innovating more as a team together, like we've done for the past 1 year with AW.
Absolutely. So again, we've been, like I said, we've been learning this also, right? So I'm glad that we had this learning opportunity, and any more challenges that Chargebee and any of our clients have to throw at us, because that's where the fun is, right? That's where
Right.
you kind of always are on your foot and trying to solve
Correct.
something new, right? It
Correct.
makes everybody's life very engaging and
Definitely.
interesting. Thank you, Supriya, once again, and we'll catch you soon in the next live stream that we do with you. Take
Yes.
care. Bye
Thank
bye.
you.
Thanks,
Bye.
everyone.